Skibbity-bop-beep-bop, bibbity-bop-beep-bop, skibbity-bop-bop-bop-boop-bop. This Kirblog is about a man with internet cloud who started a certain website. I debated, starting with that, with the musical intro again, but I'm glad to know that my cringe factor has not decreased. Welcome, welcome everybody. I think, is this the first Kirblog of the year? I don't even know anymore. I don't know. I've been so doing 800 things that I don't know who I am anymore, but I know who I have with me. So 20 years ago, just a few days before this video came out, a little website called Spriters Resource was first brought to the internet and taught everybody a thing or two about how your favorite video games work. And it was all started by the man that I'm joined by today, Dazz. Say hello, sir, to all the internet out there.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
See, normally I would expect that to be followed up with, like, hello and welcome to Did You Know Gaming Extra. I'm so used to that by now, because Dazz is also one of the founders of Did You Know Gaming for also now well over at least 10 years, I think, right? When did you guys launch Did You Know Gaming?
Yeah, we had our 10-year anniversary last year.
That's right.
So,
okay, wow. Yeah, so 20 years ago, Spriters Resource, and of course also, by extension, I believe, sound resource and texture resource and model resource, whole bunch of things. Really incredible resources, if I do say so myself. But
I appreciate that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny because we hadn't talked a little bit. Daz, you and I have an interesting kind of weird pseudo internet relationship, because I think you and I had always been like aware of each other for almost that entire time, like all 20 of those years or close to it, but like we only ever really talked like a small handful of times in all of that, but we had many mutual friends and otherwise, and I'd certainly seen your work in various ways, but I guess I want to go back to the beginning. Give us the little Reader's Digest, because I know that you've been an artist, and I believe you did comics once upon a time, and you've been on the internet a long time. And was it not just your birthday recently?
It was my birthday yesterday, in fact.
Oh my God! Well, happy 104th birthday.
Thank you very much.
I just turned 99 a few days. That just goes to show how long we've been on the internet for. But
Started late.
Yeah, internet time is also like completely backwards because things pass in 5 seconds. But yeah, I don't know. Give people your Reader's Digest of, I guess, kind of how you started on the internet in general and what led you to doing your thing.
So I guess I started out pretty much with sprites straight away. I don't know how old I was now, maybe like 11 or something, and I started to rip sprites in order to try and make fan games and sprite comics, because they were all the rage back then. And I basically just used to make comics with my friends, and then eventually I sort of realized other people also use sprite sheets, so I made my own website back in the day, which was before the Sprites resource, with my friend Deekman. And we ran Deacon Dazz.
I do remember that. Yeah, I vaguely remember that. Wow.
Yeah, those were the days, man. That was back when everything was manually done, HTML, all that sort of jazz.
Yeah.
An absolute age to do anything. But I've just been doing the same thing for 20 years now, which is kind of unbelievable.
Well, backtracking a little bit, because it's funny. I think that stuff is, and doing that sort of thing is so, or if not yesteryear, much like building a website, it's so different and so much more. It's so much easier. I just built a portfolio site in like Portfolio Box or whatever, and did it in about 2 hours, as opposed to back in the day when I was building websites in Flash, which I think was very quickly just outdated of a concept. But ripping sprites, this was not an easy task for people. I not to interfere my own story into yours, but I became Kerbifer. I picked that as my screen name when I was 12. Because I was playing Kirby's Adventure on probably a very crappy emulator at the time, and I do not condone piracy, but this was 2000 whatever,
I,
or
I
1990
somewhat
and whatever.
I stand in defense of 12-year-olds pirating games that they could never have afforded.
Sure,
I
sure, yeah.
If it wasn't for that level of piracy back in the day, in order to rip sprites, I mean, basically my entire career wouldn't exist, right? So
Well, that therein lies the whole thing, because I think a lot of people, what I was getting to is I don't even think people understand like how that actually works, and to be honest, I didn't get it for many years until I was meeting people who were specifically sprite rippers and webcomic artists and things. So but it was done through emulating games, usually pixel games from back then. This is probably maybe the newest thing at the time would have been like N64 or PS1 maybe.
yeah.
What was the actual product? I don't know how difficult or easier it got over time, but how did you actually go about doing, and especially at 11, figuring out how to do that?
Yeah, so back in the day, it was literally, you boot up a game. We didn't have any tools in order to make it easier, so we would just screen grab frame by frame when we needed it, and then cut it out manually, drawing or erasing the background away from the sprites in order to kind of just have it fresh and clean. And then over the years, I don't know, SNES emulators, they started to then have tools in order to remove the background so you could then capture it easier. And then other tools started to come up, which allowed it to like automatically save a new screenshot every time the animation changed. And after that, people started to reverse engineer the ROMs instead, and that became a lot easier.
It's funny too, because I think perhaps a more modern, it's a few years old by now, but a more modern-ish pixel game that people might be somewhat familiar with this process is with Undertale. But Undertale worked a little bit differently in that it had what I knew as sprite sheets, which to me was, oh, you're ripping sprites and putting them all together in a single image for people to use and reference and make animations out of from there. But like Toby Fox would make the sheets and then like kind of shift the posing of it around, and that was one giant image, and he worked with that. But that wasn't how it worked back in the day. If anything, it's funny because it evolved into that's something that you could do, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So
Yeah.
some older games were actually made up of like sprite parts, and
Yeah.
then they would manipulate. So Street Fighter 2 is a good example of that because it's so complex. They would split it up into pieces and reuse different pieces for different sprites. But obviously, when you're ripping from the game itself, you can't separate them, so you just have the full frame. But
What
then over time, we can take the pieces instead. But in reality, we don't need to be as efficient with our space and all that sort of stuff. So it's just easier to have the full frame.
What out of curiosity, because I remember the first time I used a program that allowed me to have transparency in an image was like a gift from God. That just blew my mind. What did you
Yeah.
use for that? Because I had like back
Paint
when
Shop
what
Pro,
Paint Shop.
man.
Oh, okay. I had I had Macromedia Fireworks.
Oh,
Was
wow.
what that was also that was the program that I learned alongside what was at the time Macromedia Flash.
Yeah.
Long before Adobe, yeah, I believe it was MX 2004. I think was what I was using, but
The good old days.
good old days with massive quotation marks. But yeah, fireworks was. I mean, I'm sure even compared to whatever rudimentary Photoshop, but it was that was relatively easy for just you know. For exporting individual frames of a sprite, if you wanted to do that for icons, or if you wanted to export animations at the time, and then import some of that stuff into Flash or anything. That was real cutting edge stuff in the mid 2000s. But yeah, Paint Shop Pro, was that like an extension of MS Paint that just had more things you could do?
It was its own thing. I can't remember which company actually made it now. It was so long ago. I don't even know if it's still. They kept going for a long time, but
Really?
then everyone dropped it and moved on to Photoshop because it became the industry
Of
standard, right?
course. Yeah, I can't even remember. Yeah, Photoshop, I want to say maybe I swapped to in like 2005 or 6 or something. That sounds about right. But
Yeah, yeah.
good
I,
lord.
I was pretty quick to move to Photoshop because it was definitely just so much better.
Did you ever, just because I mean, that this was my thing, did you ever indulge in Flash much, or was that something you kind of missed the boat on?
I had a little play with it. I think back in those days, that was kind of a direction I thought about going in, is going into animation instead of basically continuing to do what I already did, and that turns out to actually be its own thing. Um, I honestly believed like I had to try and learn something on top of it, and it turns out that running a website in itself is its own thing. And then doing video editing, I kind of wanted to do Flash, and then the Flash days ended, so I just moved on to doing video editing instead, and that's where Did You Know Gaming kind of fell in.
Yes, I want to get to that as we go through the history a little bit on forming Spriters resource. When you were building it, I mean, like, was the intention? I mean, but as the name implies, like, was it meant to be like, hey, let me have a hub for people to go? Because I do remember in my days of just finding sprite sheets and things, like usually for Mega Man was kind of my go-to thing. I do recall a few sites. There was one. Oh, that is now escaping me, but it was one that was very, very specialized in Mega Man specifically, and they had like
That was Sprites Inc.
Yes, that's right. Oh my god, yeah. And
Yeah.
they had like everything Mega Man ever at that point, like all whatever the Pixel series were up until maybe even up until Star Force. I think that would have been like 2007 or 8 or something. But yeah,
I mean it's still going. It's still going. I don't know
Okay.
how active it is in terms of being a sort of sprite archive, but it's definitely still a thing, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
But there were many, GeoCities and Angel Fire type sites
Yeah.
that just
I mean,
had like a handful of them, and I'd go around and collect whatever I could from wherever, and then when your site came around, finally I was like, oh my god, this is so convenient to get what I need. At the time.
Yeah. That's the thing. The early days of the internet, I think that there was so many opportunities to see a gap, that there was something that people needed, and it was possible to make something that was all encompassing. It used to just be that websites would have, it was like a personal website, right? So you'd have things you'd write, and if you were into it, you would have a sprite section,
Yeah, and a comic to go along with it,
Yeah, you got to have a comic series,
Of
otherwise,
course,
what's the point of
absolutely.
going to the site, right?
No, I literally. This was funny. There was an old Sprite comic site from many moons ago. I won't even name what it was, but you probably know what it was. And that I was
I
on.
think I do.
Yeah, and that I was on, and a couple other people, Tyson Hess and some other folks were on at the time. And before I was even part of that, I was on a forum called the Fallout Shelter, where that was just a haven of people that did sprite stuff. And this ties in a little bit with the whole story of how I like became Kerbifer and was making TTA and everything. But I was drawing stuff, and back then Photo Bucket I think was the probably the only real place that you could post any kind of images. I don't think DeviantArt had taken off just yet to as a gallery for anything. Maybe not yet. And I was meeting all these people on this forum that all had sprite characters as their icons, and they were all edits of, and I'm sure this is a familiar site, but Sonic recolors and Kirby recolors and Mega Man's and and Mega Man Zero, the Zero, Mega Man Zero
the pelvic
version,
thrust.
of course, yes, with his like horrible posture was like, that was the go-to for, like every version of, the old, of the Tome characters back in those early days was just an edit of Zero and, slap some anime hair on top, and there I went. But I was like, oh, that's okay. I guess this is a thing. It was kind of more me just following a trend of that's what everybody around me was kind of doing. And I just was like, well, I want to be cool and I want to be part of the club. And, the only reason that my Kerbifer character was a Kirby is just because I couldn't find, something equivalent to my little imp thing that I made. Because I'm like, well, I can't just make him a Kirby. I don't own Kirby, but I mean, Kirby whatever something at AOL.com has like a red Kirby with a ninja hat on, so I mean I guess it can't be that bad, right? So I'll be a white Kirby with a Link hat. But
Yeah.
did you ever have one of those, or did you just go straight to your character with the hat and everything?
I pretty much, so my first character that I had for myself was an edit of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh,
But
okay.
what I did was I edited him to basically have a mohawk. So I flipped his spikes upside down, recolored it green, and made him into a human being.
I think I had, you know what, because it was Sonic characters specifically that was like, that's what everybody's doing. I think I drew like one sketch of like a green fox that was like Chris the Fox, and then I was like, I feel unclean. Somehow I feel
Yeah.
gross doing this, and I'm gonna never do this again. But it was always green. Why was it always green? I don't.
Because green is so edgy, man.
So what was it? Edgy? You know, actually, that is funny because I did in my game, I did have, surprisingly, of all the Kickstarter characters that got donated that were like the enemies in the game you could fight that were all the other users, I only got like one Sonic the Hedgehog edit. And it was a green hedgehog with a cape and a sword, and I'm like, oh, that's the best. That is just everything.
That's like peak 2004, right?
No, and he was totally into it. He said, no, edge it up, make it like funny, stereotypical, whatever. I'm cool with that. I'm like, hell yeah. So, oh my gosh. So I guess I don't know. Maybe if this is particularly the next part of the history, but Greg and Shane, who are two other, I believe, co-founders, yes, of Did You Know Gaming, but they were both, I believe they were both sprite guys in that era, were they not? So Shane, I know, had been doing like animation and stuff for like game development, I think. Was that correct? I mean, correct. Please.
Yeah. So Shane was, his name online was Badass Bill, and
that's right. Yeah.
He then he ran the Spriters resource. So the Spriters resource was founded by a guy called Mark Brown, otherwise known as Bacon, and he ran it for, I think, 2 years, and then he kind of gave up on it, gave it over to Shane, and he ran it for about 6 months. And I kind of then told him that he wasn't doing a very good job. And he just then gave it to me because he didn't know what to do. And that's when I kind of took it on and ran wholesale with it. But he then moved into doing game artwork. I'm trying to think of the company. The guy, I think he now works on, he did the newest game he did was like Wargroove, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was like a weird, it was very weird. It was very dark and strange, these games back in the day. They were like, and I think he worked for, it was like a mobile phone company way back when.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's the early days. Okay.
Yeah, like way before the smartphone. I can't remember, like Game Jolt, I think, maybe, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Okay.
But then, yeah, so he did that for a little while, and it turns out when you actually have to make entire sprite sheets from scratch for yourself for a game, it takes a long time, takes a lot of effort, and it's kind of tedious.
Yeah, I mean, I do to this day. Even I literally went to school for animation. To this day, I still struggle with walk cycles and run cycles like you would not believe. It's so obnoxious. In fact, actually, I would still go back. I remember when I was doing the 2011 tome web series, I still pulled up, like, I think it was the Mega Man ZX sheets of some of the playable characters and just like, you know, studied frame by frame because I mean those are just like really fun, punchy, you know, kind of really bombastic walk cycles, the ones they had for those, and I you know, like they're really on their way to someplace if you watch the way that those characters run. I still studied those, like, after even after like I graduated. I'm like, I still need a cheat sheet for that, a literal cheat sheet for this for this particular kind of thing. So yeah, doing that is so intensive.
I think that's one thing that, having now, you know, been around the Spriters resource for 20 odd years, it does kind of, you begin to appreciate the level of animation that went into all of these old sprites, and how what it actually managed to do by making sprite sheets was make a good kind of framework to look at, to analyze animation, right? Mm-hmm. And I found that was when I wanted to get into Flash and all that sort of stuff, I would analyze those sprite sheets back in the day, and it was the right technique, and I had no idea.
Absolutely,
it's what everyone should be doing, you know.
Yeah, and it is funny because you do toe the line with that sort of thing, because, you know, like, even making fan games and that kind of thing, it's always like, is this okay? Like, is this company going to shut me down or whatever? Because even the fact that, like, you know, you're posting the assets that are created and owned by these companies, and, you know, because you're emulating them, it's like everything about that inherently. There's a level of like, is this okay? I don't know. Is, you know, Nintendo or whoever going to come after me? But I think that it is something. It's true, and I think it did get a lot of people to appreciate. But I think also, at least for myself, and I'd bet for probably a lot of other people, I think it's something that just seeing sprite sheets and understanding that stuff in general is something that got people to want to get into animation, because I know that, you know, this is where I reached out to wanting to do the interview with you in the first place. seeing when you talked about, hey, Spriters Resource is 20 years old, I literally traced back and realized, because I was going to get into, game development originally. I wanted to program and make games, and then I realized I hated programming, but I loved drawing and I loved, storytelling. And I was like, well, I guess I got to learn how to make cartoons. And I had a vague understanding of animation, but it was because I started doing edits of sprites, because I couldn't do and especially in Flash back then, if you tried to do anything that was longer than 60 seconds, the thing would crash.
Yeah.
Especially with the vector tool, it's just like, nope, I can't handle that on your old crappy, Windows computer. Goodbye.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I think that really was a huge, reason that I got into, almost by default, like, well, if I can't program and make games and do this, I guess I don't know, I guess I'll just do animation instead. And then that led me on the path of eventually going to school for it and getting a degree in 2D traditional animation as well. So, and I would bet, I've never really asked this, but I would bet that a lot of people within my same kind of age and everything probably could have come from that same origin point as well. Or at least had it be like, a step on the way. So I think that it was ultimately really helpful. And I would like to hope that maybe a lot of game companies are appreciative of that, even if it's like, oh, I guess the people are just putting those up there and they can make whatever, gross 18 plus Newgrounds parodies or fan games or whatever with the stuff that we made, but shrug, whatever.
I think that's actually a really interesting point, because it's Yacht Club Games who did Shovel Knight actually link to the Spriters resource from their website when it's on a page basically saying how to make video game graphics, right?
Yeah.
So the fact is that they as a company use the Spriters resource because it's the best way of learning, is to look at already existing things.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, look no further than Yacht Club and by extension a lot of the people originally from Way Forward in terms of people that got inspired by that sort of thing. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them as individuals tweet about it before, and the fact is that it's kind of like an unspoken secret within the industry that everyone seems to be using it. Even Nintendo has used it, and we have evidence to show that, which is just absolutely nuts to me.
I know, yeah, it is crazy when like something becomes so just like part of the culture that like you don't even think about it that hard. But it's just, especially when something is there for so long and it continues to remain relevant, of which there are very few things like that have remained for that long. I mean, because even this is, I don't mean to even be disparaging by this, because I love the guys that run it, but like Spriters Resource is arguably still more relevant in a certain way than Newgrounds is.
Right. Well, that's I'm not gonna agree with you there, but like, Newgrounds and the Spriters resource kind of played hand in hand in terms of the video game audience there.
Yeah. Well, and animation too. I mean, because I did 70 episodes of TV Tome Adventures, which was the first version of Tome from 2004 to 2006 or 7, I think. And again, like the majority of those graphics that I edited were from your site. And I did that for a very long time. But no, and I do. I love Tom Fulp and all the guys there, and and I actually, to backtrack a little bit on the backpedal a little bit there. Newgrounds, I think, has actually become a haven for a lot of artists, particularly people that do 18 plus and not safe for work stuff, because the rules of that are changing constantly, and they deserve to have a place to post their stuff. Certainly,
yeah,
so.
Totally agree.
But I
would say that in fact Newgrounds was probably actually the starting point for me, because as a kid I would go to Newgrounds all the time, right? And there would be animations for sprites on there, and there's like that classic Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy is an RPG.
Yes, yeah, Legendary Frog, yeah, Joey.
Yeah,
of course.
And like to me that was like the moment where I kind of went, oh fuck, this is a bit bigger than just sprite sheets. It's like, this is animation, this is fan games, this is fan content, this is educational. And I couldn't believe how much it tapped into when I first took it over, because it's like, I just wanted to rip sprites and look at them.
Did you get to know any of the people from, I mean, I know obviously you've worked with, Aaron and Ross and a few people that kind of started from there, but did you get to know anybody kind of from that community at the time?
So to be honest with you, from my perspective, I was a very shy young person, and I had quite a brutal way of speaking, let's say. And I think that I was rather controversial in that sense because I
Uh-huh.
used to think that I had to prove, that I was a cool guy, right? And I just didn't ever find it in myself to contact other people. I always thought, why would they be interested? Um, and it's nuts now because I wish I never thought that. The connections that could have been made with all of these people that I respected, and I just didn't appreciate what I was actually doing at the time. And even still, I still struggle with it because even with Did You Know Gaming being as big as it is, I still have that perspective of like, yeah, but I just make it and other people make stuff and it's all better than what I do.
Well, which really goes to show, I mean, how far you've come with that too, because the fact that you guys have had, real people that have worked in the business that you've been
Right.
able to
Yeah.
have, like, I mean, as of just like in the last month or two, appearing on camera in the videos to give exclusive information, like,
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
mean,
mean, I can't believe that we got David Hayter on the channel, right? Like, as a kid, the idea of ever speaking to David Hayter in any way was
yeah.
just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like even with when I was doing my the old Nintendo collabs from I don't know if you remember those from a billion years ago, but like
Oh, yeah.
like speaking of the Final Fantasy music video, Joey Legendary Frog was one of the car. He was one of the guys that just inspired me to want to get into posting stuff on Newgrounds, and that
Hmm.
the Zerbs brothers, and a lot of those guys. And I eventually went on to and the Super Flash brothers, who are now SFB Games and stuff, who I've
Yeah,
grown
yeah.
to work with. All of them, and a lot of those guys, they all did animation stuff. Some of them did voices for me, and then even later on, when I was meeting people in the voiceover world, people still ask me, "How did you get John St. John or Yuri Lowenthal or whatever?" And I'm like, I asked them and they said yes. And then we got married and
Yeah.
had six beautiful children. But yeah, it's like you really, and granted, I do also still get where like that shyness and just that hesitancy, even if you're an outgoing person, that hesitancy, because there was always this kind of like, it's like when people were always afraid to interact with, the artist formerly known as Prince, were like, oh, you can't even look at him, and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
these. There's this weird like kind of like celebrity-esque kind of perception that people have of anybody else, where it's like, oh, they'll never respond to me, they'll never say yes, why would I? So
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
still something I think that people in general kind of struggle with. So you're not alone in that kind of regard.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the hardest part, I think, about the sort of independent creator industry is that you have to reach out to people. Otherwise, you're not gonna you're not gonna form connections, right?
Yeah, and even just asking for things and asking for help or asking to work with people or whatever. I think a lot of that was kind of frowned upon. Oh, if you have to ask, then like it's like, well, no, but of course if you want to. It's funny. I had people that were professionals that are now far bigger deals than I am in their industries, that I can look back to their emails from 2000 whatever, being like, hey, I like your work, I'd love to work with you someday, and now they're like
Yeah,
hot
yeah.
shit and everything, and whatever, and I'm like, oh wow, humble beginnings happen sometimes.
I mean, that's actually, you brought up Undertale earlier. There was
Yeah.
a moment where we were ripping sprites from Undertale, and the
Uh-huh.
first file in the graphics data
Uh-huh.
is just called like 0000,
Yes,
and it's
that's
a
right.
note that just says, don't just upload these the sprites resource. It makes sense if like just upload the ones which you'd normally see, but don't spoil the game. At least wait a year.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was like that moment where I was like, what the fuck, man?
I mean, I don't doubt Toby is 100% got to be one of the people that frequented the site.
Yeah, for sure.
Between
And
Starman and all that stuff.
I mean, the site gets, uh, on average, I would say 500,000 people look at it every month,
Wow.
which is fucking phenomenal to me.
I still I mean I frequent Did You Know Gaming quite a bit.
Mm.
I have those on, the older ones on for background noise all the time still. And it's like, oh, a new one's now. Oh, time to get some food and watch this, and etc.
I really, and this is the thing I've got to say, like over the years, it's been 10 years doing videos now, and it's amazing to me how I've lost this kind of drive to continue to watch the same content, and yet people are still into it.
Yeah.
And I love that because I don't have that in me, right? And yet there are people who are so into it, and I don't know, it fills my heart with joy.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think that that's also kind of the lifeblood of internet content. This is moving ahead a little bit, but just having stuff that's got replay value to a certain extent.
Right.
That's kind of how a lot of internet creators survive in general, is having their stuff last. And moving into digital gaming, you mentioned and so ironic. You said, "Oh, I had difficulty with talking to people," and yet you mentioned that your introduction to Shane was, "I could do this better than you." All right, here you go, kiddo.
And I will say though that represents the exact attitude that I had, where I was like, I'm the best, and I'm gonna fucking do it better than you, and don't talk shit to me because I'm 12 years old and I know everything.
So they all think that they're invincible. How did that relationship form? And then I don't know how Greg fits in there as well. But how did you guys go on to form Did You Know Gaming in 2000? I don't even remember at this point when that first
2012.
Pokemon was that 12?
So,
okay, wow, yeah.
So basically, Shane sort of started Did You Know Gaming with a Tumblr blog and a Facebook.
That's right, and VG Facts. I think shortly after that, kind of.
Yeah, so I got involved when he was starting to move into videos and making his website because I already ran the Spriters resource. So I was like, well, I know how to deal with advertisers and try and like get the right contacts together for that kind of thing. And then I slowly just sort of got involved further and further. Started to do video editing. Started to do script writing. Then we made VG Facts as a way to kind of curate all of the information together in a way that would be easier to read and just Google, And then from there, I basically had a failed marriage. I moved back to my hometown, and Greg had just finished film school.
Oh, cool.
So he then moved in with me, and I was like, bro, we should just be making fucking videos all the time. Why don't we? And so that's what we did. We then just jumped straight in and started to go hardcore on it.
And he was like, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that.
I mean, in all honesty, the early days, it's unreal how it all kind of came together, because it was me and Greg just hanging out, and we would then play a bunch of Japanese games, get really high, and just not really know what we were kind of doing, and being like, I bet other people would be curious to know more about these games, because they're not going to look into it. They're not going to do this, because who the fuck gets high and just plays Japanese games? Right?
Oh, and this was eventually what led to Region Locked, I assume?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then we did Region Locked, and it turns out people fucking loved it.
Absolutely,
and,
yeah. Actually, those are some of the most replayed for me. Is those absolutely,
right.
Yeah.
I was so shocked, because to me that was just like a little, we did Did You Know Gaming, but then that was just like a little side project. I was like, I want to do this, and Shane said, go ahead and do it on the channel. It's not a problem, and I just went hard on that for years and years and years with Greg.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, they had, I think back even to those early days, and you guys had quite a few cool guests. Narrators and things doing episodes. I remember I had met Shane at MagFest, God, whatever year that would have been, forever ago. And it's like, wow, the guy who ran Did You Know Gaming is ripped as shit. What in God's name? What kind of fucking protein powder are you eating, dude?
I gotta drop this because it is a great story. Where Shane came over to my house. It must have been like 8 years ago now. And I'd never really met him, but he came and stayed with me.
Uh-huh.
And he ordered some protein powder that was Tutti Frutti flavored protein powder, and he mixed it with grape flavored Fanta. And it was in that moment where I was like, I thought I understood people, but it turns out I fucking don't know anything.
It's ironic too, because he does have the smooth, buttery British voices that you and Greg also share, and yet I think he's only ever, like, I can recall maybe him narrating like one video that's ever been on that channel. He seems to not be interested in that.
So even when it came to me voicing it, I was reluctant as fuck because I was
Mhm.
like, we get all of these big players come in and do these voiceovers. I'm gonna do it, and I'm just gonna get ripped to shit, right? And it turns out I was right. But then you just got to kind of get over that,
Yeah.
and then people who just want to digest the content are still gonna watch it.
Well, no, absolutely. And you know what? Actually, it's funny because I remember. I'll even admit this. I said to Shane I pulled a you. Apparently, we both have that in common. I was just like, yeah, I think a lot of the YouTubers that you hire are actually not that really good at voiceover, and I could do better than that. And then offered myself to do it. And I think I narrated maybe two episodes of that, but I also did the did you know voice acting, rip
Yeah,
off
yeah.
tribute. I mean tribute
You
video.
say rip
You
off,
know,
but it
well,
was its own thing. You got to give
sure,
yourself.
sure. Well, and it was good enough that you guys were kind enough to have me write a small handful of episodes of Did You Know Gaming for the channel, which was I much appreciated, and I met Malik, Cartoon Gamer, as a result of that, which he's had a great time with you guys too. He's a good friend.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
And has narrated some very fun ones that are some of my favorites. Donkey Kong Country is a video game. It's always what I go to.
He's got a very iconic voice.
He does, and boy, he loves his rare. He loves his rare
Oh,
games,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, no, and I even realized because God, I look back on some of the old the ones that I made myself, the Did You Know voice acting ones, and I'm just like, oh God, even as someone who does this professionally at that time, I'm just like, oh, I got stuff to learn. I could do better than this,
Yeah.
honestly.
I mean,
So,
that's the thing, dude. The first video I voiced was about Pokemon the Trading Card Game 2 on the Game Boy.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
and going back and listening to it is just shocking. I sound so bored and I sound so disinterested, but it's got a certain British class to
Well,
it, right?
you know what though? Okay, see, it's funny you said this. This is my actor side of me coming out. When you're doing like not quite like voice acting, but you're doing voiceover, like that kind of stuff, like commercials or documentaries or whatever. There is this weird kind of like ninja in the bush sort of like you have to not care, but you gotta care. You gotta give me nothing,
Yeah.
give me everything. It is this weird sort of zen state that I have trouble reaching, to be honest. Even when
Well, so,
you know.
yeah, like I still write videos and voice them, and what sometimes, obviously over the years, things have become a little less interesting when you've just spent weeks researching something, writing it out, rewriting it, and then you come to read it, and you kind of have to remember that this is the first time people will hear it.
Mhm.
So you got to sound as if they should care, because at that point, after 3 weeks of knowing, I don't care that much.
Uh-huh.
So you work out little techniques of like, it's 1,000 years where it's like, oh, that's a big number, So you got to do the big number voice.
Well, actually, I think you know what I'm realizing as I'm thinking about this too. Another kind of conclusion I think we both kind of independently came to is just the infusing the little bit of your own personality, which is such it that you toe the line a little bit because when you're doing trivia videos, as much as possible, you want to be impartial and not have like opinions infused in there. But sometimes
Yeah.
when like say I think in one of the I did like 6 different, Dragon Ball, Did You Know voice acting videos because there's that much trivia about that shit. I remember like, and in the masterpiece Dragon Ball Evolution live action movie and the amazing PSP video game based on the film, like that kind of thing. But like you and Greg especially would have little moments like that of just like, that's right, and by the way, it's a really good game you should play yourself at some point. Just little moments like that. No, I appreciate that. That kind of keeps it lively, here and there.
That was one of the like contentious things that we introduced to the channel, I think, because a lot of people were not keen on it. Again, as I said, when we were getting into it properly, we were just laughing at each other.
Uh-huh.
We would record it in a cupboard. That was our setup on a crappy microphone in a cupboard, talking about, oh, they shot these young girls with radio waves and now they run this broadcast television show. And it's like, this is just nonsense. So you start to crack up at what you're saying. And then you've got the other person in the background cracking up. So it kind of, you got to acknowledge how ridiculous some of the shit you're talking about is, right?
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, the fact that I could not tell you for the life of me how many episodes that you guys have done, in total by this point. But my God, I mean, and the fact that you've gone on to do these really interesting sort of, mini documentary. I mean, like the ones that Forrest was, I think his name, right? Did like,
Oh yeah.
about like Iwata-san and Miyamoto-san and a lot of those guys, and I mean I still go back and listen to the Satoru Iwata one here and there, and I still tear up at the end. It's like it's very very
they were special videos to us, I think, because they were like, this is bigger than just haha fun trivia. It's like this is we're talking about actual, I don't know, deep rooted feelings that we have towards an industry that over the years has become a bit jaded and jilted because of microtransactions and the evolution of gaming. But then it comes to time where you have to, like, we're talking about childhood heroes, right? And you can't help but really want to make something that people are going to get behind and constantly go over and just kind of really understand somebody that you respect and why they should respect them.
Absolutely. Oh, and I think also a twinge of the production of those. I felt like they crept a little bit into the regular ones too, because as you guys started doing ones about not like the general Mario series or Pokemon series, you did on individual games, and then even beyond that, specifically the one recently about like what was Pokemon Gray, like where did that come from, what could have been Pokemon Z kind of thing, and to see these like. Especially because not to be specific, because it's so generalized now that this happens. But like I personally, as a consumer of content, I'm gonna barf from saying that. I'm tired of seeing like, here's why Pokemon Black and White actually is the worst generation. Like, and here's this 2 hour long whatever. I'm like, all right, But like when you guys just have like. I know what I'm gonna get from the stuff that you guys produce, and I always know it's gonna be as informal as possible, as unbiased and objective and subjective as possible. That's the impression that I've garnered from DKYG, and I almost said Dikajiga. Let's not say that. But no, I'm glad that because I felt like it's even something. It's something that I could have seen people, you guys getting like, maybe we can move on from this, and other people will, do videos or something. But the fact that you've maintained it for 10 years, 11 years by this point, like I'm glad. And, even just from my perspective of it's always something to look forward to as a show. It's really good. So
that point though, about sort of trying to stay unbiased and everything is that's kind of, I don't know how to put it, but it's something that it actually harkens back into the Spriters resource, right? Because the content is not us. We aren't important. We're delivering it, but the information is the star. So why should we make you know what we think when really you should form your own opinion?
Well, and I think even the closest thing you've done to that, and this is even in a very respectful way, is often I've noticed that if like, there's a specific narrator, like a person of particular interest that really loves the material or knows that, or is associated with, a particular game series or even just a certain game or something like the fact, like, because even for me, like I got to the couple episodes I narrated, I did Mega Man, and then Mario and Luigi. So there's that in and of itself. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, Aaron doing some of the Metal Gear stuff until eventually getting, David Hayter himself, which is like, oh, wow, okay, NBD, whatever. I think that even that too, like that's a level of like, it's a level of care I've always appreciated, like, from the beginning, that I've always kind of appreciated. So I think that, I feel like more content could stand to do that. Because even sometimes when I'm watching those kind of like even just other documentary videos, and then they start talking about, because this person was kind of a jerk, or like, this game actually kind of sucks though because I played it when I was like 12. Or I'm like, all right, and then you've lost to me immediately.
I think but you've hit the nail on the head where it's like the guest, we would get in someone who's relevant, because that way it we would be watching their content in order to kind of. It's unfair to say that you should expect us to fucking know everything, you know? And sometimes we don't know something about a subject that people clearly want to know about. So we're obviously going to talk to people who do know about it and have shown passion for it. And in doing so, we want to promote them. So we should get them to voice it.
Yeah. And I think even, you know, from a personal standpoint, I remember I was so excited about, because I had bought several of the Mega Man art books, the complete works that Udon was publishing in English out here, and I remember, like, you know, any shred of new stuff about Battle Network, I was like, oh my god, I have to share this. And, like, Did You Know is the best way to do that. So, you know, that was one that I pitched and wrote and voiced, and I was just happy that, like, oh good, people know about, like, hey, like they almost pulled, like, the 2 version, you know, or even 3 version thing from the beginning, and, like, there were these characters that they never had, and, you know, like, just this little tiny thing that you wouldn't have noticed. It's on one page and, like, the very corner of something, a little, you know, a tidbit that no one else would know otherwise. Like, that's exciting, just to be able to share that stuff with people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can completely relate, because I remember early on, one of my favorite game series of all time is Suikoden, which is a JRPG
of course.
Konami, but no one fucking played them, right? So it was difficult because the channel was to appeal to a broad audience. So to then go, okay, we talk about Mario and Mega Man and Sonic and Metal Gear Solid. I want to talk about this Japanese RPG series that they've not made a new one in like 12 years. And it becomes kind of hard, because that's why we wanted to do Did You Know Gaming Extra, because that way we could, like, talk about shit that people might not just actually click for, you know?
Yeah. Well, even I mean, on the note of the obscure RPGs, I mean, you know what I think might be possibly the most rewatched video. This goes back to Region Watch, but the one that I've watched the most of anything on the whole channel is the one about Live Alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had such a hell of a time making that video.
Oh yeah. Well, no, and it's fantastic. And then, of course, you know, however many years later, we got the incredible remake. Which I don't know if you guys got the chance to play that yet, but god damn, it's so good.
Perfect. Exactly what I wanted, man.
Yeah,
I had somebody contact me who was a publisher for Square Enix.
Oh, really?
They were like a PR guy. And they basically said that our video was circulating around the office like a year or 2 before they were announcing it.
Really?
And there's this part of me, I don't know, but I like to think that we had some part in demonstrating that there was an interest in it enough internationally that they should make it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you know what? I think that's a fair assumption to make. You know, not like, you know, like you're taking credit. It's just out of, like, that stuff matters. Like, these companies are paying attention to these things and looking at what people are saying and what they're putting for, you know, because I mean, even like, you know what, I'll say that, like, not that this is going to matter much, but I'll say this here. I would kill for, in that 2.5D style with, you know, full voiceover and remastered music and stuff, I would kill for a remake like Live Alive got of Chrono Trigger. I know that there's probably a lot more legal complication to that because of a lot of different things, and it's probably a lot less likely to happen. But I would love that, and I've always joked, I feel like that's one of those, like, you know, sacred jars that maybe Square Enix will break open someday when the time is right. Yeah. Who knows?
Oh, you mean we should remake Final Fantasy VII, the most popular video game ever made.
And lo and behold, I actually got to work on that. Funnily enough, I did some background stuff on that game, which was like, what? Oh my god! I think that and, you know, even on the Capcom stuff, Battle Network Collection, you know, how many years were people saying, bless you guys for Legacy Collection of Classic and X and Zero. Please, God, we want Battle Network someday, somehow, would be great.
Just also on that note, because it demonstrates how circular everything is in my life, and I can't believe it. But on that Legacy Collection, we reverse engineered it to have a look at the data. Turns out they used the fucking sounds resource.
Wow. I
And it was just like, you come across these things and you just don't ever put it into reality a little bit. You just go, oh, that's cool, and then move on. And it's
yeah,
like, when
yeah.
you then start to realize that everyone's fucking doing it, dude.
I even I have to tell you this story because actually I don't think I ever shared this with you. When I found the sound resource, however many years ago, and I was like, oh, this is a gold, as Mister voice acting obsessed freak, this is a gold mine for me. And I have this weird obsession with Sonic 06 where I couldn't even tell you, I could not tell you now if I love it ironically or unironically. I think it might be a bit of both. It's a very strange
I
thing.
feel you, man. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I feel you.
I that was when 4Kids was still doing the voiceover for Sonic for the games and everything. And I remember just like combing through every single file that was on there to look for anything. And one of the very first interviews that I did with another actor was with this guy, David Wills, who at the time he was the voice of Espio the Chameleon. And in Sonic 06, he was the Duke of Soliana, which was like the tutorial voice. Press the X button to jump and do the homing attack, that thing. I interviewed him on a unnamed podcast a billion years ago. And I was telling him about how I found this file, and it's in the game. It's just played as is, because that's right, because he was also like the GUN agent that like instructs Shadow.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're going to talk about.
Shadow, head to Wave Ocean. Agent Shadow. He stops to restarts the line, and then there's another one like that of Dan Green, the voice of Yu-Gi-Oh, who was Knuckles at the time, where they have like every single character in the game saying the tutorial, like how to defeat every single type of enemy. That like 90% of them are not used at all. They just exist and they were recorded and they're in the data.
Right.
But there's one of Knuckles, I think he's talking about like the big, like the lava golem enemy. And he's like, the core of the head is its weak point. Sorry. The core of its head is its weak point. Got to attack it when it opens. That's the clip. Word for word what I just did. That's the clip. And I'm like, that's
amazing.
Or even, I mentioned background voices. There's a clip of like, it's clearly like all the actors in a room together, like doing like background whispers and stuff. And you can hear the director like in the booth with them at the end. And it's like, I saw something in the sky. I didn't know what to do. Cut. And now that I know how this works, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, mystery solved a little bit on some. Actually, you know what? Here's some exclusive for you. Okay, let me see if we can, because you and I are probably similar in age. When you were a kid, I'm sure you played Smash, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
course.
Did you play Melee?
Yeah.
Were you intrigued?
More than anything else, man.
Well, of course. Were you intrigued by the sound test?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Were you intrigued by the fact that in the sound test, in the announcer part, you can hear fighting wireframes, Giga Bowser, and Master Hand, as if they were playable characters.
Right, yeah. I noticed that about Giga Bowser, and I was always well confused about it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that caused the kind of mystery.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny because now, here's a exclusive, not an exclusive, but a more of a theoretical. Now that I understand how this works, what I realized, kind of looking back on that, is, oh, well, first of all, you record everything just in case you need it for something, and that very well could have been, hey, maybe on the classic mode, like versus Mario, that thing. Maybe they would have had versus fighting wireframes, and they just didn't end up doing that because they designed the modes in different ways or whatever. And then hell, even to learn, it's funny when Xander, who's the current Smash announcer, did a couple episodes for you guys, the whole note of like, yeah, I had to record probably the name of every video game character ever made in existence as the Smash announcer. One, just to make sure that no leaks would happen, and two, just in case they ever needed it, because you never knew who was going to get picked up. Yeah, there's so I still to this day I would love to do like because I did one episode that was about like all the voices in Smash and how they're like from people all over the world, literally, depending.
Mm.
And like especially with Ultimate now, it'd be really interesting to go through and do like an updated version of that with all the other DLC characters and everything, because it's wild how much there is. I went off on a whole tangent with this. Please pardon me. I got so excited about all this stuff. I don't know. Well, no, actually, here's so this is the last kind of question that I had in mind. But you guys have gotten to do a lot of really really cool things with just interviews that you've done and exclusives and particular kind of looks into certain games and things that no one else has covered. I part of it is what's next, and not even just what's next, but what are some other things that you and the others have talked about that you'd really like to do, or that maybe like what's like a dream video of Did You Know or Region Locked or on Scene 64, game history secrets, that any of that kind of stuff. Is there anything that like, any holy grail type of stuff you'd really love to do?
I mean, I think that the entire world of the gaming audience that we have would love for Mother 3 on the Nintendo 64 to get leaked.
Oh my god,
that's one of those one of those stories that I can't drop. And it will always be there, and every day I want more.
Yeah, I know. Every once in a while, I'll go back and watch that E3 trailer and just be like, I'd love I literally never finished the original Earthbound. I watched people play it. Never touched Mother 1. I have always wanted to play Mother 3. I've always thought of, I'll get Matt, or not Matt, Tomato Clyde's translation or something. Maybe I'll take the plunge someday because I've always wanted to, but I see that trailer and I'm like, this is the Earthbound game that I want to play, because I am all about that low poly N64 shit like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, me too, man. And that's the thing. Like, I think that for me, my more recent interest is trying to find things that people haven't found yet, Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of that, we're now, trying to contact old developers and see if they've got old builds of games and any old material that hasn't been shared yet, because a lot of them don't know people want to see it.
Yeah.
That's the really hard part, because you're trying to get in touch with people who, they're a comfortable arm's reach away from the audience that we actually really harbor. They're not watching our videos. They're professionals. They're not as interested as the audience. So you kind of got to just convince them to show an interest in their old unfinished shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be hard, because a lot of them don't like sharing things that they don't consider to be up to scratch in terms of quality.
Sure. Or just even out of worry of like, will this get me in trouble? I mean,
right.
I've been surprised at some of the stuff that you guys have gotten to actually share. Like, wow, like I guess it's been long enough, or they're feeling comfortable enough to, because that's the other problem too. I think that sometimes, like, even when you want to share stuff that's like interesting, you also never want to like place blame or cause any kind of like issue or whatever. It's not meant to be like controversial, but sometimes inherently it can be. So I can appreciate also like on the research side of things, because I've done that a lot for things where you want to be delicate, you want to make things comfortable, but you also want to like it is like a treasure hunt almost.
Right. I think one of the difficult things as well is that we talked about bias in the videos and whatnot, but there's a certain degree of like, I have some moral standards that I can't defend or treat like they're not dog shit.
Yeah.
When I've researched certain people in the games industry and followed where they started, what they did, where they've gone, and you do start to realize that some of these people should probably be looked at, is they've just been working behind the scenes doing really shady shit, and no one has acknowledged them because they're not making things people really like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's this fear of kind of exposing people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to invest a load of interest into someone that you don't like.
Yeah,
Bobby Kotick, right? Like, no one's a fan of his.
Mm-hmm.
No one follows what he does and goes, oh, I can't wait for the next thing that he's involved in,
Yeah. Well, at the same time, I feel like there is, and this is a whole, I could go on and on about this, but I feel like there is also a twinge of people being interested in, watching people burn And
Right.
which is why I see a lot of those videos about like, here's why this person sucks and how they fell from grace and then they never did anything else again. It's like, oh, cool, thank you, okay.
Yeah,
So
I see. I don't want to see people burn needlessly, but
Yeah.
I want to see people acknowledge players in the game and what they did and how it evolved. It's
Yeah.
not the individual, but rather their choices that should be criticized.
Yeah. I going back to stuff that, because you reminded me with the Mother 3 thing, actually, the Earthbound 64 bit is and actually I'm even kind of surprised that you guys haven't jumped on this yet, or maybe perhaps it's something in the works, I don't know. But Dinosaur Planet, when the N64 version of that popped out, I think a year or two ago, and there was quite a bit of buzz, and I mean there's a whole team of people trying to basically take that and finish it. With what they have left.
What's quite incredible is that basically all of the old team from Rare who left, Kev Bayless and all of that, the OG crew, we're now, great friends of the channel. They talk to us all the time. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, I think that we probably do have it in us to make a proper deep dive. To interview all of them and get all of that information that people don't have out there,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as someone who doesn't even do it to the extent that you did, I reached out to Kevin Dave, also because I love Kevin Dave's work, and they're great guys. Shout outs to them, and go check out DK Creations on YouTube. They're fantastic. But
absolutely,
yeah, they. A big reason that was motivating me to interview them was because I wanted to learn anything, and I didn't even, I was in that camp of like, yeah, Star Fox Adventures is it's all right. But it was also, I acknowledge it was a product of, a bunch of different circumstances. And of course, why wouldn't you be excited to work on a Miyamoto project? Absolutely.
Yeah. For sure.
But seeing, and actually even the version that leaked where it was becoming Star Fox Adventures, to me, in that same way that like, Earthbound 64, that's the mother game that I want to play Dinosaur Planet with Saber. Like, I every time I see any bit of that, I'm like, oh, there's something about this game that is just like, I would have been all about this as like a 13-year-old,
Yeah.
So I certainly hope perhaps that might be one on the horizon, because that would be really cool to see you guys do. We'll just have to see. Yes, dude. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end, but yeah, thank you. Oh, did we go over an hour? Oh, we did. We went just over an hour, but thank you for your time. I know you're a busy lad.
No, it's always a pleasure, man.
Absolutely.
I always try and the way I put it is that anyone that's interested in anything that I have anything to do with, I've got the time for them.
Awesome. Well, I would say go check out Did You Know Gaming and Spriters resource, everyone. But if you're listening to this, you probably already do. So please continue to go to both. And you're on what is your Twitter again? Remind me.
It's the VG resource.
Yes, that's right. So please go follow Dazz. Continue to give the crew over in the UK your love, and we look forward to everything you guys have planned in the future. Any final words to everyone listening?
Don't forget to share love with your family and friends. It's very important because most people don't. We go through life trying to criticize one another to make ourselves feel better, but in reality, if we bring each other up, it makes everybody feel better in the end.
Well, it's really profound, man. Well,
yeah, dude.
And really stupid. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see y'all later, everybody. Take care.
Farewell.
Hey there, folks. Chris Niosi, still here. The craziest thing happened. Later that same day, I got an email from a gentleman who went by the username Flamezero many years ago, 17 years ago, in fact, on Newgrounds, when I was just a wee lad, still in high school, working on TV Tome Adventures. Flamezero was very popular at that time for a Mega Man Zero fan cartoon called The Last Cataclysm, which, weirdly enough, was one of my first times doing, like, internet amateur voice acting stuff, and I played Copy X, one of the major villains in the cartoon, in the second episode. And I recorded some stuff for the third episode, which never came out because he ended up kind of disappearing off the net and having a whole different life to lead and everything. And so here we are, all this time later, and Flamezero decided to put out the finished portion of the third and final episode of Mega Man Zero: The Last Cataclysm on Newgrounds and on his YouTube, which I'm going to link in this annotation here if you want to check that out. You can tell, good lord, my ancient microphone that I was on, and you can hear, baby Kirblog from all the way back then, trying his hand at voice acting at the time. And there's a couple other people in there that are perhaps you might recognize. I won't out who they are necessarily, but perhaps some other voice actors that are working professionally now as well. So, humble beginnings. But yeah, if you want to check out Mega Man Zero 3, The Last Cataclysm, the third episode that was not to be, and see a little bit of what that was like, a little peek into my tragic past on Newgrounds. Go check it out. I'll have a link to it at the end here. And big thanks to Flamezero for sharing this with everybody, because this was a fun little romp down memory lane. Take care, guys.